The Middle East is nothing like the Midwest. It's a really tough neighborhood, no mercy for the weak, no second opportunity for those who cannot defend themselves. We are fully sober about it, and we are under permanent threat.
Jerusalem, U.S.-China trade war, and elections in Iraq. Hi everyone, I'm Ian Bremmer here in New York City, and this is your GZERO World. We've got Puppet Regime for you in just a little bit, and a tremendous week for our big interview guest. It is Israeli former Prime Minister Ehud Barak. But first, your world this week. Big news this week is the Americans opening their embassy in Jerusalem. It's a big move. Not many other countries support it. You've only got a couple Central American governments that are either already there or are planning on opening one. The Europeans strongly oppose. You have the French government actually saying the move is a breach of international law. Trump doesn't care. He's more than willing to oppose traditional American allies on a whole host of issues. Think Paris Climate Accord, think the Iranian deal, think the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now you've got one more thing. But what a great week for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. First, he gets the Americans out of the Iran deal. Then he's able to strike the Iranians all over the place in Syria. Now he's got the Americans over there opening the embassy in Jerusalem. And he won the Eurovision contest. Only thing going badly for him? Massive corruption campaign at home in Israel with him and many of his closest Confederates. That's not going to stop anytime soon. But for now, he's happy. I'll tell you who isn't happy: the Palestinians. And you've got tens of thousands demonstrating at the Gaza border, many of whom were paid money by Hamas or were provided with threats to say, you better go and do this or else. They did. They feel hopeless. Over dozens killed and thousands injured. You couldn't be further from an Israeli-Palestinian peace plan right now. Jared Kushner notwithstanding, he was there saying it's a great day for Israel. We're going to keep moving on the peace plan. But back home, his father-in-law is going to be focused on North Korea. Israel-Palestine could not be farther from peace. President Trump was good to the Chinese this week. He said he didn't want to go after China telecom maker ZTE, despite saying there'd be penalties, because they'd lose a lot of jobs. I didn't realize America First was about Chinese jobs, but consistently, Trump has tried to say he has a good relationship with the Chinese president. In fact, it's been much better than his relationship with the German Chancellor or the UK Prime Minister. In fact, it's almost as good as the French president. Kind of surprising, except China's been helping him on North Korea. It's by far the most powerful country in the world aside from the United States. He doesn't want to get into a big fight, and maybe even likes the guy a little bit. We're going to see movement towards more of a deal, backing away from trade war and confrontation. I don't think it works long term because these two countries have a whole constellation of interests that are not moving in lockstep. They're moving farther away. But for now, I think Trump and Xi are going to do everything possible to show that they're simpatico. Had elections in Iraq this week, won by a populist candidate. You may remember him, Muqtada al-Sadr. He was the guy that was in charge of all of those anti-American brigades during the Iraq War. He's changed his stripes. Now he's just a broad-based populist. The Iranians don't like him. The Saudis don't like him either. But the Iraqis apparently do, and it's because they're angry. There are over 2 million Iraqis that are still displaced by war. You've got massive infrastructure problems. There's a lot of corruption. The economy's not doing well. Not even 45% of the Iraqi population turned out to vote. That's the lowest they've had since 2003, because like in so many other places, they don't think democracy's working for them. Look, Iraq isn't going to blow up into bigger war anytime soon, and the Americans don't care as much as they used to, but this isn't a great story for a region that's becoming much more heavily loaded by conflict. And now, your puppet regime.
Mr. Kim, thank you for coming. This is a big breakthrough. What's on your mind as you prepare to meet with President Trump?
I can't sleep at night.
Is it because you run a gigantic gulag of a country?
No. I have a nightmare. A terrible, terrible nightmare. I see Gaddafi. He gave up his weapons and Hussein. Hussein. If only he had a missile. And Ukraine gave up a missile. And now look! Ceausescu! Ceausescu, no! Oh, no. I have you.
It goes like a wave around the sea there now.
And I'm here in New York City with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. A new book, My Country, My Life, Fighting for Israel, Searching for Peace. What a great time to be able to talk with you here today, Ehud. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Start with the big Iran story. You opposed the Americans leaving the deal. You wanted them to work with the Europeans, try to work with the Russians. But it sounds like you believe that the implications of the United States withdrawing and this great pressure is potentially a win for the United States.
Yeah. In the short term,
it
wins. You don't know what will happen, what will follow. There is a power and magic in boldness. And there is clearly boldness here. But it's not clear to what extent it's calculated steps. And at a certain point, over boldness ends up with a severe mistake.
In the next 5 years, what are you more worried about from Iran? Is it war or is it revolution and regime implosion?
I do not worry about implosion from within. I would be happy to see it, but I don't believe that I can influence it. War as a result of the clashes with the Iranians in the Golan Heights is something that I believe we do not need.
Golan Heights, territory held by Israel, close to Syria, quite contentious these days.
You know, Israel, it was Ben-Gurion, the founding father, who was the first to formulate the asymmetry between Israel and its neighbors. He said, we have to win each and every war. They have to win only once. So this asymmetry creates our thought that we develop, we advance, we strengthen ourselves during those intervals between wars. So we do not need preemptive wars unless it is against a neighbor developing nuclear weapons.
Does Netanyahu agree with that formulation?
Yeah, he probably intellectually used to agree, but his behavior in the recent several months showed that at least pro forma, he wants to project the feeling that we will go whatever it takes. I don't like the hyper talking in Israel. You know, we usually adopted the Western movies kind of rule of if you have to shoot, don't talk. Recently, we talk a little bit too much. It sometimes creates the feeling that we are heading toward the war. I don't believe that that's what Netanyahu really wants. He's basically a risk avert. He's basically a cautious person, and I say to his compliment.
It was Bibi Netanyahu that helped juice the pot a little bit when he decided to give that presentation, show and tell, Iran lied, big Mossad operation, yet again able to grab enormous amounts of information. Pretty surprising move, right? What did you think about that?
There was nothing new in it. Nothing, not a single element which was not known, and nothing which went beyond the date of in 2015 where the deal was signed.
So another thing going on, of course, right now, the Palestinians and the border with Gaza. We've seen big demonstrations, a lot of violence, some of that unprecedented. From the Palestinian side. How do you think the Israeli response so far has been appropriate? How worried are you about where this is heading?
Respecting the border is a main pillar of stability. We cannot afford to let thousands of people cross it just by moving toward it with some demonstration. So we had a rich variety of means to block a demonstration from 10 yards, but not as much to block a demonstration from 500 yards. So that was the cause of some of the loss of life at the beginning, and we do our best to do it. But people in the world should understand there is no way but to face it with the means we have. We cannot afford the border being not respected and just crossed.
Now, you're an Israeli patriot. You're one of the most decorated former soldiers in the history of the country. But you've also said that if you were Palestinian, you could see joining a terrorist organization.
I didn't say anything about the Palestinian cause. I said something about the relationship between the circumstances under which you are born. So I didn't say that I am the Israeli patriot who would join Palestinian terror. I said that if I were born Palestinian, so I was with the same genes, but with Palestinian identity, I probably would have ended up choosing one of these terrorist organizations.
Are you worried that the ability of the Israelis to think of the Palestinians as equally human, to be able to accept, if I were Palestinian, here's what I would be thinking, is that going away?
I'm optimist. I don't believe, I visited and looked very closely at Belfast, and I visited Bosnia and Serbia. You see places where human communities were bleeding into each other's hands for hundreds of years. And a moment came where it became clear that instead of looking into the abyss, both communities, just the only element which changes, as I once put it to Arafat.
Yasser Arafat, former leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
It won't be solved in heaven. It's we human beings have to solve it. If we do not solve it, our successors will have to deal with it. Nothing will be changed.
Finally, let me just ask you about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. You had Guatemala, Honduras, Central Americans, not very exciting, but now you've got the United States as well. Big announcement, big move. How do you feel about that?
I feel very happy and proud. I think that every Israeli feels that something that had to be done 70 years ago finally had been done by probably the 10th or 12th president since we were established in the state. And in this regard, I should compliment President Trump. He does what he says. And at least in the Middle East, he basically said something which is disturbing a little bit. Put on the shelf all this nation building, all these democracies, human rights. Let's focus on the realities, fighting against terror, put Iran at the bay with their hegemonic and nuclear intentions, and deal with the real issues. He even promised to try to solve it. In this regard, his step to move does not exclude anything for the Palestinians. I know it's alienate the Palestinians. It will be a cause for a lot of condemnations or whatever. But basically, it's a natural step. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. You put your embassy there. It does not even exclude the possibility that once a Palestinian state will be established,
they can have Jerusalem as well.
They can have their embassies and in some Arab heavily habitated neighborhood in Jerusalem, which might be part of their capital. So I think that, certain things are so natural and justifiable. Israelis are happy with it.
Now, you said Trump gets credit for that. I assume you think Netanyahu gets credit for that as well.
Yeah. I think that the last several months, or probably for sure several weeks, are the best that Netanyahu had in all his political career. The fact that he resonated almost rhymes with what we hear from Trump, and it's not just verbal, it's also in actions. Make Israel feel more confident when we are navigating our own role in the area.
You and I haven't even mentioned the corruption scandals, where if we were talking about Netanyahu a month ago...
Here or there?
There. Well, here, a different story. No, they still talk about him here. But in Israel, right, I mean, this is now, you've got so much other news that he's taking credit for. Do you think that this means that the corruption scandals go away?
No. I think that for the next, last week no one mentioned it, and probably for the next 2 weeks no one will mention it, but it's go like, how you call it, steamroller, the kind of, this machine will move very slowly, but pushes everything. I don't believe that you can stop corruption investigation in Israel. We already had the president and a former prime minister, and Minister of Finance and several other ministers. Somehow we are not clean of corruption, but for sure the law enforcement system and the justice system is still alive and kicking in Israel, in spite of very deliberate efforts along the last a year or 2 years by Netanyahu government to suppress, to crack the authority of the Supreme Court, to weaken the civil society, to shut up the most critical outlets of the media, and even to question the ethical code of the IDF. So we are under a direct attack on our basic pillars of democracy. But once again, I believe that there is enough energy when it comes to the very, very close to breaking what is so precious for all of us. I believe that you will saw the energies erupt and put an end to it.
Ehud Barak, thank you very much.
Optimist note.
That's it for our show this week. Next week, I'm actually off, taking a little break. Everyone deserves one, but come back the week after that, and I'm going to bring you one of the world's top experts on populism and democracy, Princeton's own Jan Muller. See you then.